What's up, guys? MCMMA here, and in today's video I'm going to be ranking every undefeated fighter in the UFC. Um, just as a little preface, the only guys that I included on this ranking, or to be included in this, all the guys here have at least 3 fights in the UFC. Um, I feel like if you're undefeated in the UFC and you've only had a fight or two, it doesn't really count because at that point you haven't really faced any real competition. So these are guys who have, faced some competition in the UFC and are still undefeated. All right, let's get right into it. At number 10, I have got Rafael Esteban, who is currently ranked 15th in the flyweight division. Esteban, he's got 3 wins in the UFC so far. Felipe Bunez, Jesus Aguilar, and Charles Johnson. He's a pretty good grappler, but he is a very boring fighter. He's dominant on the ground, but he doesn't really attempt many submissions or go for a lot of ground and pound. He's more of a control kind of guy. And he also has missed weight twice so far in his UFC career. And I think both times were pretty bad misses. So because of his not very entertaining style and his consistent weight misses, I think that he's probably not going to be undefeated for too much longer. I know that even though he is a good grappler, his striking is not very strong. And I think once he starts running into guys around the top 15 range who can actually defend takedowns, he's going to struggle a lot more. Oh, and also, he gasses out badly in most of his fights. I think in all of his UFC fights so far, he's won the first 2 rounds pretty clearly, just through his grappling, and then the third, he's gassed out bad and hasn't been able to put up much resistance. And if he's gassing out that badly in 3-round fights against lower-level competition, it's not going to bode well for him once he starts facing ranked opponents. So that's why I have him ranked last out of all of the undefeated fighters in the UFC. At number 9, I have got Farid Basharat, a bantamweight who is currently unranked. Basharat is probably best known for him and his twin brother being in the UFC together. Obviously, his brother is Javid Basharat, who was also a pretty hyped up prospect at one point, but he is on a bit of a skid right now. I think he's lost 2 in a row to Amin Zahabi and Ricky Simone. But Farid is still undefeated. He's picked up some pretty solid wins in the UFC. Damone Blackshear, Taylor Lapilus, Chris Gutierrez, those are all pretty solid UFC fighters, but he hasn't been particularly impressive so far. He's not getting a lot of finishes. He's not really proving in his fights that he's clearly levels above his opponents, and because of that, I also think that he is going to lose his undefeated record pretty soon, especially in a super competitive division like bantamweight. I think it's probably inevitable, but props to him for staying undefeated so far. And he's got 5 wins in the UFC, so he's clearly pretty solid, but I just don't think that he's anything special. All right, at number 8, I've got the last unranked undefeated fighter in the UFC in Andre Lima. The reason that I have Andre Lima ahead of Basharat and Esteban is because I think Lima is a better prospect than both of those guys, and I think that he's got a lot more potential. Lima is probably best known for being the guy who got bit by his opponent in his UFC debut against Igor Severino. But outside of that, he has shown that he's a very skilled fighter. He's picked up good wins against guys like Mitch Raposo, Felipe dos Santos, Daniel Barez, and he keeps improving in every fight too. So I think he's got a good amount of potential. I think he's a guy that I could see being in the top 10 of the flyweight division pretty soon. And I'm excited to see what's next for him. All right, the first top 10 ranked fighter out of the undefeated fighters in the UFC, I have got number 10 ranked light heavyweight Azamat Murzakanov at the 7th spot. This is where the list starts to get, really good because if you guys have seen some of my other videos, like my most underrated UFC fighters video and my breakdown of UFC 321, you guys would know that I am very high on Azamat Murzakanov. I think he's a super skilled fighter. I think that he is going to beat Alexander Rakic this weekend, and from there, he's probably going to be looking at a top 5 opponent. But So far in his UFC career, he's been extremely impressive. He's looked great in all of his wins so far, and his finishing ability has also gotten a lot better, especially in his past couple wins against Brenson Ribeiro and Alonzo Menefiel. He's gotten pretty impressive knockouts over both of those guys. And I think that he's not just, I mean, obviously he has a ton of power, but he's also a very technical striker. And I think the only thing that's really been holding him back so far has just been his lack of activity since he doesn't fight too often. But I think that this weekend, his fight against Rock is probably going to be the first time that a lot of people are really seeing him. And I think that he's going to put on a show and prove to everybody why he's undefeated. All right, at number 6, I have got Lerone Murphy, the number 4 ranked featherweight contender and possibly next title challenger. Still not sure about that, but could be very likely. Murphy picked up a huge win in his last fight against Aaron Pico, got that sick spinning back elbow knockout. But to be completely honest, outside of that, before that, he was coming off of a few kind of mediocre or unimpressive wins. The Josh Emmett fight kind of sucked. I know that Murphy's game plan obviously made a lot of sense against an opponent like Emmett, who hits like a truck, so he kind of just circled around him and outpointed him. But it wasn't a very fun fight to watch. And before that, the Dan Ige win, it was a very close fight. He almost got knocked out by Ige. I know some people thought that Ige won that fight. I don't think Ige won. I thought it was a decently clear win for Murphy. But despite the fact that he's undefeated so far, he hasn't really been putting that like emphatic like stamp on a lot of his wins, if you guys get what I'm saying. Like, he's got a lot of close wins, he's got a lot of wins by decision, and I obviously think that he's a very good fighter. He's definitely top 5 material, but I think once he starts facing the elite of the elite in his division, like Volk, Movsar Evloev, Diego Lopez, I think he's going to start struggling against those guys. And I think regardless of who he gets in his next fight, because it's probably either going to be Volk or a guy like Diego Lopez or Movsar, I think that he most likely loses his next fight, which is why I have him at number 6. All right, at number 5, I have got the undefeated welterweight Michael Morales. Morales is currently ranked 8th in the welterweight division. He's going to be fighting number 2 Sean Brady pretty soon at UFC 322. And I'm super high on Morales. This dude is an absolute athletic freak. He's a sick striker. He's got crazy pop. And from what we've seen so far in his UFC tenure, he's got pretty good takedown and grappling defense as well. So I will most likely be picking him to beat Sean Brady. I think it's going to be a very close fight. It's kind of a tough one to pick, but I think that stylistically Morales is a really bad matchup for a guy like Sean Brady, since I think that Morales is going to be able to defend a lot of Brady's takedowns, and on the feet, it's not really going to be close. Morales is way better than Sean Brady on the feet. And Morales hasn't faced too much competition so far in the UFC, but he does have a few good wins, like Jake Matthews, Neil Magny, Gilbert Burns. Those are all guys that are in kind of like the 10 to 15, or maybe like just off of the rankings range at welterweight. And I think that in this next fight against Sean Brady, he's going to really prove why he's undefeated, and I think he's going to put on a show. All right, at the number 4 spot, I have got the number 1 ranked featherweight contender, Movsar Evloev. Evloev, on paper, he's had a fantastic run in the UFC so far. Wins over Aljamain Sterling, Arnold Allen, Diego Lopez, Dan Ige. Super impressive, but his last 3 wins, the Lopez, Allen, Sterling wins, have all been razor close. You could make the realistic argument that he lost all of those fights. I personally think that he beat Aljo and Diego. I do think that Arnold Allen won that fight, but it was very close, so I don't think that's one where you can necessarily call it a robbery. But despite the fact that he's undefeated, he really hasn't. He's kind of been squeaking out a lot of these wins, even though they are against very high-level competition. I think that he's a guy who, again, I think that if he fights Volk next, which he should be fighting Volk next, he definitely deserves a title shot. I think that if he fights either Volk or Diego Lopez next, I would probably pick him to lose in both of those fights. But he has proven that he is one of the elite fighters in the featherweight division, and I think that once Volk retires, he will have a decent shot at maybe becoming champion of the division. All right, at the number 3 spot, I have got Shavkat Rakhmonov, the number 3 ranked welterweight contender. If you look at Rakhmonov's resume compared to Evloev's, it's definitely not as impressive, but this list is not based off of undefeated fighters with the best resumes. It's who I think the best is, and I personally believe that Shavkat is better than Movsar Evloev. Shavkat's last fight was probably like the worst thing that could have happened for him. He took a short notice fight against Ian Gary, who, by the way, is one of, if not the toughest stylistic matchups for a guy like Shavkat, since he's another super long-rangey striker and he's got excellent takedown defense. But he won that fight. A lot of people were shitting on him for it, but I thought that it was a pretty decent win. We know that he was hurt during the fight, which I think contributed to his pretty conservative game plan. And I mean, as we've seen in all of his other UFC wins, like, he has one win by decision, and it was against Ian Gary. He's finished every single other one of his fights. The Wonderboy fight, that was another one where that's the big issue with Shavkat, is he's super injury prone. Like, he was hurt in the Wonderboy fight, which was another one where he wasn't super aggressive, especially striking-wise, but got that submission, which nobody else has done to Wonderboy in his career, I believe. The Jeff Neal fight, absolute sick fight. Shavkat showed off his striking there. He also showed off that his striking defense definitely needs some work, but his striking defense looked pretty good against Ian Gary, so I think that that's something that he's been improving on. And I think that whenever he fights next, his manager said that he's looking to come back early next year, which I would love to see. I think that given the fact that most of the division is booked up, especially in the top 10, I think the only opponent that really makes a ton of sense for him is like Kamaru Usman. I don't know if Usman would take that fight, since Usman seems to think that he's just going to get a title shot off of beating Joaquin Buckley. But a fight like Usman, or maybe he would fight like the loser of Islam versus JDM, I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people in his next fight. I think that a lot of people have been forgetting how much of a monster Shavkat truly is, and I think that he will likely win his next fight, and then after that, he's going to get a title shot. And, I mean, I still think he's a guy who has a pretty decent chance at becoming welterweight champ. I know his momentum slowed down the past few years just because of the inactivity due to all the injuries that he's had, but Shavkat is still an absolutely elite fighter, and I hope that he comes back soon so we can prove that to everybody. All right, at the number 2 spot, I've got Khamzat Chimaev, the current middleweight champion. This dude would absolutely be number 1 if it wasn't for the other undefeated champion. I'm sure a lot of you guys can probably guess who that is. But, I mean, Khamzat, outside of the inactivity, there's nothing more that you could want from his UFC career. Maybe the most dominant UFC fighter ever, if not the most dominant fighter ever. He's definitely up there. Absolutely ragdolled Dricus in his last fight. Even though the fight was super boring, it's still crazy to just be able to dominate a guy like Dricus like that. Before that, first round submission over Robert Whittaker. Like, who does that to Whittaker? Like, nobody. The Kamaru Usman fight was the most competitive fight of his career, and I think that one says more about Usman than it does about Khamzat, since it was on short notice, and Kamaru Usman is one of the best defensive grapplers in UFC history. But then first round sub over Kevin Holland, win over Gilbert Burns, and then outside of that, he just was running through everybody before that. I don't see him losing probably ever. If he stays at middleweight, I don't see him ever losing. If he moves up to light heavyweight, which I think will likely happen at some point, I think that there would maybe be more of a chance. But out of the current landscape at light heavyweight, I don't know if there's anybody who could defend a takedown from Khamzat. As a division, the light heavyweight division is pretty weak grappling wise, and I mean that plays right into Hamzat's strengths. So I don't know if he's ever going to lose a fight in the UFC, and especially since I think he's one of those guys who will probably retire on top. I don't think he's going to be a guy who is like, in the UFC until he's like 40 or something. He's been, like I was saying, one of the most dominant fighters ever, and I think that's just going to continue. And the only reason that he's not the number one is because of this man, Ilia Topuria, who I think is the best undefeated UFC fighter. He's the current lightweight champion, former featherweight champion, and I mean, honestly, when it's all said and done, I think that Ilia is going to be the greatest fighter of all time. The run that he has been on is just absolutely mind-boggling. Like beating Volk, Holloway, and Oliveira back to back to back. Absolute insanity. Probably the best 3-fight run in UFC history. And I mean, he's just going to keep going. Like, I genuinely don't understand how somebody could beat this guy. Like, he has no holes in his game. He's probably the best boxer in the entire UFC. He's got an iron chin, as we saw in the Charles fight. Like, Charles hit him flush with an elbow, and Ilia just completely ate it. He's also an elite grappler. Again, this guy put Charles Oliveira, one of the best grapplers in UFC history, in a crucifix. That's insane. Who else is doing that? So I genuinely don't think there's any path to victory for any of his opponents. And if he stays at lightweight, I mean, I don't see any way anybody beats him. If he moves up to welterweight to keep trying chasing Islam Makhachev, that's one where I think that Islam would have a pretty decent chance just because of the sheer size advantage that Islam would have over him at welterweight. But even then, like, I still think there's a decent chance that I would pick Ilia there, since I mean, I think his power would still translate at 170. And I mean, this guy's he's so insane. Like, it's insane how good he is. And I think he's going to be the greatest fighter of all time. And I doubt that he ever loses a fight. But anyway, those are my rankings for the best undefeated UFC fighters. If you guys agree or disagree with any of the placements on this list, just let me know in the comments. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and thank you guys for watching.